I want to start the interview by asking you about the famous eclipse of April 8th. There's so much information on social media and people not only giving their opinions, but also prophesying, right? And speculating as to what it means. What can you tell us?
Well, what I can tell you is, as you mentioned in the intro, I do love astrophotography and love astronomy, and have been, since a young kid. And so at this time, the question always is about the eclipse. And what I find fascinating, and this is where I land, is all these things are absolutely amazing. They really are. Eclipses by themselves are not that rare. They happen every couple of years in some part of the world. But certainly over the last 7 years, when we have the one from 2017, and then to this year, the typical idea is that it's making an X of the shadows over our country. And I find it fascinating. I find it interesting. In my own mind, I don't miss it. I think my heart is that, what does it mean? I've heard people say that they believe, from the Lord, that it's going to be a sign of revival. Others they believe from the Lord that it's going to be a sign of judgment. And so you have all of these different contradictions. And my attitude, or my thoughts on it, is nobody knows exactly what it might mean. We do know that the Bible does talk about signs in Luke 21 and Matthew 24 and other passages. But I would say most of those signs that Jesus is referencing to look for, signs in the heavens, those mostly happen during the tribulation period. They are very supernatural events. They are not normal events, periodic events like we have with eclipses. And so I think some people are mixing them. They're mixing the teachings of Scripture. When Jesus says, "Oh, there's going to be signs in the heavens," people's hearts failing them for fear. Well, those are all very unique events, that you can read the book of Revelation and see, mountains coming out of the sky, stars falling from heaven, the sun growing dark, the moon growing dark, all the stars growing dark at once. Those are not normal natural events. And so I think some people are mixing what this particular eclipse could mean. And others are, as you said, they are making predictions. The rapture is going to happen. They made maybe that it's the sign of Jonah and other things like that, which again, people might accuse me of not being excited. No, I'm excited. I just don't, I'm not falling for the idea that we know exactly what it means, or if it means anything at all that we can figure out, because, Jesus said in Luke 27 and Matthew 24 that I'm coming at a time that you don't expect. And so if any of us are expecting, or we've calculated the date based on the eclipse or whatever else, I would say you're automatically wrong, because if you're expecting it, Jesus said, "I'm coming at a time you're not going to expect." So I think Jesus did that intentionally to keep us always being ready, and not to go think, "Oh, well, I guess I can watch it. This is a high watch time." And then, this is not a high watch time. I can be casual. I don't know.
I agree with that. And I think Christians need to be aware of sensationalism. I don't know if you've seen or heard, there's a lot of talk on social media about CERN.
Yes.
Reopen the Hydrogen Collider exactly on the 8th, and also NASA trying to shoot some missiles or something on that day. And so everybody is trying to read into these things. And of course, we know that there's a spiritual side to it, but I think a byproduct of sensationalism is fear. And the Lord is calling us to be watchful and to pay attention, but not to fear. And when you put all these things together and everything that's going on social media, the byproduct, without doubt, is fear. What do you think about that?
No, 100%. And, people, Christians are again, those that are excited, they're smart enough to say, well, no, I'm not fearful. But yet in many ways they're concerned, and I think one of the bigger things is that, look, I have family. I would say most of my family all of my family is not saved. I got saved at 18. I was not raised in a Christian home. And so I've talked to them over the years. Some of them have been, maybe they're mockers at times. And so if I come out and I let's say I jump on that bandwagon and then I talk about the eclipse and, oh, this is it, you better be ready. And then April 9th comes and they're going to go, hey, Mondo, still here, huh? Still here. And so I think there's wisdom in just remaining cautious in saying, I have no idea what it means or doesn't mean, because again, I'm not a prophet of the Lord, but my goal is not to win the approval of the world. And we know the world's going to hate us. So that's not my point. My point is to maintain credibility amongst those that we're trying to see saved, again, family, friends, and others. And if we do that with wisdom and to say, no, there's nothing definitive of what I can tell you, thus says the Lord, then when it comes and goes, they're not going to have room to maybe mock or put in a sarcastic comment, because I'm going to say, oh, I never said anything. You remember that? Yeah, no, you didn't. And so then I can still have that opportunity to share with them the most important message, which again is the gospel, and that they need to be saved through Jesus Christ. So that's, I think, what I'm seeing on Facebook or my own Facebook and in our ministry is that, and I'll say it this way, I've seen this for a lot of years, 30 years I've watched. I've seen dates come and go, predicted dates, even very interesting things. And what happens? There are the mockers come out in force, and I'm just encouraging wisdom. That's all.
I agree with you. There's too many people crying wolf.
Mm-hmm.
And then even with the tetrads back in 2014 and 2015, yep. I mean, I taught plenty about that. And I remember telling the people, don't expect anything horrible to happen on that day. It's just a warning, and we need to watch what happens. We need to be watchful. We need to be, we need to be ready. Occupied till I come. I wholeheartedly believe in that. I think it's important for people to distinguish between discerning or prophecy and when you are making a prediction. I've taught my church about this, and I've explained to them there's a difference. We cannot be predicting things, because then the day comes and goes and people say, they don't know what they're saying. I'm just going to go on living and doing my own thing, because they're wrong all the time.
Yep.
So it's a great danger, I think, when we start predicting things and preparing people for disasters and this and that and the other, and the day comes and goes and nothing happens. So this thing with CERN and NASA and all the other things, we'll just wait and see.
Yep, that's exactly the right attitude. I mean, we know that CERN has some occultic backgrounds to it, no doubt, and it's amazing to watch, to have observed what they've done over the last 20 years. And again, I read physics books, astronomy books. That's what I do for fun, and so I know that there is an element of actual physics and science that's taking place at CERN, for quantum physics, very important. But it's interesting that wherever it is or whoever it is that's part of the group, that they have allowed themselves, some of them, to get caught up into the occult and other things and just other strange things. So again, April 8th, I wouldn't be surprised if they do it as well. I think also that there are those that look at the hysteria that is happening, I think, with the eclipse, and then they're thinking, hey, let's contribute to it. So because as far as I remember, the arrival of the starting of CERN again after a 2-year hiatus, that announcement wasn't made till relatively late. And so you're thinking, I wonder if they're looking around and going, let's do this just to provoke some of the hysteria out there. And the thing with NASA, that actually makes what people might not understand is what NASA's doing is actually very, very, it's very scientific. So they're doing it on the eclipse because they're trying to look at some ionization that's happening in the atmosphere during an eclipse. So that's great science to understand how the difference between when you have direct sun there, because how often do you get to do that? Well, you only get to look at the atmosphere without the sun during an eclipse, or maybe at night or something. But so that's very specific. So that makes good sense to me. I don't think there's anything sinister there as it relates to doing that experiment while there's an eclipse. I mean, that makes great sense. But CERN, no, I trust them less.
I'm gonna have to agree with you on that. I've been thinking a lot about, there's a lot of people, the so-called Doomsday Preppers. If God says it's the end, then it's the end, and there's nothing we can do to make preparations for that. It's one thing to be prepared as far as, spiritually speaking and all those things, but to buy tons of cans of food and toilet paper and all those things that people do. I mean, how do we as believers prepare for the end times? How would you, being a pastor and dealing with people, and the fear factor is something we cannot ignore. How would you do that?
I think you nailed it, is that the first thing, a Christian is not allowed to fear. I mean, we know that because we know fear and anxiety go hand in hand. Philippians 4:6, be anxious for nothing, but through prayer and supplication, make your requests be known to God. And what? The peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will guard us. And so we know that, Jesus said in Matthew 6, don't worry. So we have these scriptures, which don't worry, don't fear, which tells us that God is in control. Now, we take that scriptural admonition, and we say, yes, Lord, there's nothing for us to be concerned about or fear. And then we take that, and as is typical, the Bible always has a balance. We know in Proverbs 22, verse 3, that a person sees calamity and prepares for it. So we have this balance of, of having. I'm not saying you have 7 years of food so you can survive the tribulation period. That's not even reasonable. But it is wise to be out of debt. It's wise to look at what's coming as it relates to the digital currency, or some of the cashless society, the way that the New World Order, the global elites, they are trying to do this. We know this, that they love chaos. And that much is true. So is it wise to make preparations to be out of debt, and so that when things come, we'll be better prepared? Yeah, that's just common sense. You could do that 100 years ago. It has nothing to do with the end times. I think that's just biblical, proverb wisdom. But that's the balance. Is I think some people are coming into thinking that, depending on a person's theology, hey, maybe we're going to be here for the tribulation. I don't think we are, but nevertheless, that doesn't mean that we're not going to have trouble. Jesus said in John 16:33, in this world, you're going to have trouble, but be of good cheer, right? Take courage, take heart, because I've overcome the world. So we have these promises of God and of the Lord himself promising to give us his peace. So in that regard, I think there's a certain level of common sense of doing these things, being prepared, being wise, without caving in to the world's falling. Because I do think this, that the church is, as we know, in general, I mean, we love our brothers and sisters that are true brothers and sisters. Only God knows who those are. But as we know, many of the denominations, many of the bigger churches, they're not talking about prophecy. They're not talking about the Lord's return. A lot of them can be very seeker sensitive, or whatever that means for them. They don't take the gospel serious. Maybe they're buying into the social justice. But I think as we continue down this road towards the Lord's return, I do think that the West, and especially America in particular, that we're going to continue to be squeezed, and we're going to see a lot more of what we understand as being the beast system in preparation, the stage setting. And so I will say this, not that I want any of that, but if we look at church history, persecution or adversity, it has always been healthy for the church.
Agreed.
I think most of the church right now, even those that will look at us that talk about prophecy and be like, yeah, this was all fulfilled in AD 70. But now they're looking around and going,
Hmm.
How do I answer this?
Yeah.
So I think that's good.